I'd like to introduce to Jean Marsh.
I'm sucking an extra strong milk.
That's right, you carry on sucking.
It's funny, this sounds like the Clinton tape. Just say that, carry on sucking. Oh.
We'll let you get comfy, don't worry. A very warm welcome to Crawley.
It's a very warm.
Very nice to see you. I'd like to give some people here background to your career. You came from a working class background. Your parents were cockneysmith. Your mother was a barmaid, I believe, and your father was a labourer. So it's good old English stock. But initially you became a dancer, I think, because you had a terrible illness that had a form of paralysis and you couldn't walk. So when you started to get better, the dancing was like a therapy to help you?
I guess so. It wasn't my idea. My parents were very musical, very interested in music. And they knew about ballet. And they loved music hall too. And when I wasn't well, I was quite young, I was 7, they thought, as I was getting better, that anyway, the route out for a working class girl in those days was to be a dancer, preferably a tap dancer, really. And so it might mean that I could be a professional dancer and not work at Woolworths. And they thought it would be good for strengthening my legs now that I was walking. But the ironic thing is that I wasn't very good, but my big sister was brilliant. So it was worthwhile us both being sent to tap dancing school.
So you went to school together then, to dancing school with your sister?
Oh, the usual thing. I mean, all parents, what you give to one, you've got to give to the other. I make no favourites, you know, all that.
Now, you went to charm school, didn't you? Rather than drama school to start with.
Well,
Can you describe
the thing is, it's an awful thing to say, because obviously it didn't work, because I haven't got any charm.
Could you explain what charm school is?
Well, I call it a charm school to be rude, because it wasn't the sort of thing that I would have chosen. After going to the dancing school, it was discovered that my sister was a really wonderful dancer, a ballet dancer. I'll tell you the difference between us. My sister and I both passed all our Royal Ballet exams, classical ballet exams. The pass mark was 65 and 85 was honours. The highest mark I ever got was 65 and a half. And the lowest my sister ever got was 89. So it was thought that it would be a good idea if we went to a better dancing school. And I also had discovered by this time that something to do with acting, because around about, I think stage 4 or stage 5, you start to do a lot of mime. And I liked that, and that was sort of opening up an acting thing. And then also my sister was very pretty and very English rose looking. I mean, it's awful. She could sing, dance, and look like an English rose. So basically, we went to this school. We didn't really know it was a charm school. We thought it was a touch up market from the sixpenny classes that we'd been going to. And they also eventually threw in a bit of education, and I say throw in, you know, I really mean it. But because we had to pay, so both my sister and I had to work. And basically, this school did have a couple of very good people, 3 people. Jean Simmons did well. I did quite well. Shirley Eaton did well. And then there were 2 very good actresses that you may or may not know of, called Vivian Pickles and Polita Nielsen, and that was it. And they were all pretty, the girls, and they all went to auditions, much more than me, because they were conventionally pretty. But basically the thing was to be good looking and to be well dressed, and to do more commercial type things, at wearing sweaters and stuff like that.
Now, following on from the charm school, you did some modelling as well. And a photograph appeared of you, I think, in a newspaper or magazine, at Repsol. And that's how you got your first acting role. I think it was a ginger cat, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Pardon my claws.
Well,
So it's
I
a lead role.
became a model around about being 15 or 16 instead of being my sister's plain, younger sister, my type came in a bit like Audrey Hepburn. I had very straight hair and very, long black eye, not long black eyebrows, but black eyebrows. Gosh, long black eyebrows, I'm awful. And I did do a bit of quite posh modelling, like Barbara Golan and Sucky Keats. But I was also once on the cover of, I think it still exists, a newspaper called Revalet. Do you know it?
Yes, I remember it from the
It's an
70s.
art. It wasn't then, because there weren't no such things. But there was a photograph of me in there, sitting on a rock or something, dressed, smiling. But I was a bit shy and I hadn't smiled properly. And my mouth had sort of gone up like that. And my eyes are green, and they were very green then. And anyway, the producer thought I looked very
Like a
cat-like.
kitten, yes.
And so he asked the head of this school, was I an actress? And they said, oh yes, because they actually wanted to get rid of me because I wasn't going to be making any money for them in being charming and in film and so on. So I went off and I played Ginger the Cat in Pardon My Claws with a wonderful comedian called Sonny Hale. I think you're too young to remember him. Do you remember him, Sonny Hale? He was married to a woman called Jessie Matthews.
Heard of her.
She was in Dr. Dale's Diary a long time ago. Anyway, he was one of those comedians that England has some of, absolutely brilliant, and a very good actor. And my favourite notice ever was, and this was my first play, when the local review in Huddersfield said, Jean Marsh steals the show as Ginger the Cat. Well, you'd think I would, playing a woman who turned from a cat into a woman and back into a cat again. You should steal the show. That was my first straight acting job.
No other work followed from that, but I'm curious about something here, because you didn't have an equity card at this stage. Could you actually get work without having an equity card?
Do you know, the funny thing is, it's like anything. There weren't that many actors, trying really in those days, I suppose, because I don't even remember when I got my equity card, and it should have been something so powerful. I had worked, in a way, in the theatre. I'd worked as a dancer. I'd been in the West End in a Christmas play called The Land of the Christmas Stocking, playing Mary, Mary, quite contrary. And I'd been a tiny tapper in Panto. So there were those things. And then I had already, I think before I did Pardon My Claws, danced in a couple of films. It's a semi-classical dance. I was in one of Michael Powell's films, The Tales of Hoffmann, as a classical dancer. So
You were Cleopatra as well, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Were you playing a dancer in that?
No, I played Octavia. I played a proper acting role in that. That was much later. So I don't know how I got my equity card, but I did stay on in Huddersfield as a member of the company. And of course I was thrilled, absolutely thrilled. And my parts, varied considerably.
But so I'm curious about something here, because most actresses go to drama school, they learn their trade. You seem to be self-taught in some respects, because you learned your trade in rep, so to speak. And you went to drama school, I think Central School of Speech and Drama, in evenings off, just to improve...
Mornings.
To improve your technique or
Yes.
speech, whatever. But
Well, I think what I learned while I was in rep, and I used to do like a dance in a film and then go back and do rep. You got paid so badly in rep that I needed the money from dancing in a film. But what I learned was what I couldn't do. Like we all do, you get offered a wonderful job and you think, I don't type well enough, or I don't do this well enough. Quite often one's fortunate enough to get a job just a bit beyond your capabilities. And if you've got any sense, you work hard to match the job. So that's what I did. I realized that it was important to be able to rehearse a role and be intimate and say, like, I love you and I'm desperately sad that you're missing me. And then be able to do it in a 2,000 person house. You've got to be heard at the back and still sound intimate. You can't say, I love you. So you've got to learn how to use your voice. So
To project.
yes, but project so that it isn't false. And I mean, I've got a big enough voice now that I can whisper and be heard. It's that's what you learn. So I decided that my career would, I was wrong, of course, that my career would mainly be in the theatre, that I wasn't photogenic anyway, and I must have all my skills. And I loved it. I was so lucky. I didn't go to the proper school because I couldn't afford to take 2 years or 3 years off because I was working already. I went for private lessons to a voice teacher, usually at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And this was a very famous, wonderful school. I think I should do myself a kiss so you don't miss me. It was called the Central School, and they were based in the Albert Hall on the top floor. And so if you went very early in the morning and sort of mounted the stairs up to their rooms, you walked across the top and you might see Yehudi Menuhin having a little practice before he did his concert. It was a bit difficult to go in and learn how to speak when that was going on. So what I did was, just like somebody learning to type, or just honing my craft.
That's interesting. Can you talk about rep a little bit? Because this is where an actor or actress can hone her talents. It's quite grueling because you're going on the road a lot. There's lots of bed and breakfasts and hotels. It must be quite a tough life, I should think, isn't it?
It's a horrible life for older people, but I don't think it's a tough life for young people. It's a little bit like being a student. And don't forget, not everybody works and earns their living doing what they really want to do. And most actors, in the beginning anyway, have a passion for it. So you are being paid to do what you love. Certainly you don't get much money. And yes, you have to stay in digs, and sometimes you have to share a room with somebody. And in those days, the food was awful as well. But, now this sounds odd, you had to work so hard that your private life wasn't really important. You would be playing one play, learning another play, and reading a play to see what you'd be doing the one after. So you were balancing 3 roles at the same time. And you rehearsed in the morning, you might do a matinee, an evening performance, and somehow you had to learn next week's work. So if you're working terribly hard, you don't need a very high standard of living. The big thing I remember was being cold, hating having to share a room, because I've never been a very social person. And then I had to share a room, and a bed with my sister when I was a kid, and I didn't want to go back to that. But the thing that I suffered from most of all was I'd been brought up not as a vegetarian, but as a health food person. And I couldn't eat sliced white bread and Spam. I mean, I think my father would have known, 100 miles away and sent darts of, poison to me. That was the thing I suffered about. And then I got sent up a lot. Nobody had ever heard of yogurt, until I took yogurt back to the digs. Because this is a long time ago. But it's wonderful. When you're young and you're an apprentice or whatever, it's fabulous. You shouldn't start at the top of your profession. You shouldn't start rich. You should start by learning and having fun with your fellows.
Now, you were briefly married to the late John Pertwee, sadly no longer with us. That marriage didn't last very long.
Half an hour, I think.
You went to America, and John Gielgud cast you in the Shakespeare play, didn't he?
Yes.
Much Ado About Nothing, in the role of hero, which is
Yes.
quite a major role.
Yes, it is.
Now
yeah.
that got great reviews, I think, didn't it?
Well, it was a strange mixture. Of course, I was terribly lucky to get the part, to have my first role in America on Broadway.
With John Gielgud playing.
With John Gielgud
Yes.
directing and playing Margaret Leighton, a wonderful cast. And it was the younger leading lady. But it was quite frightening. And what was interesting was it wasn't totally well received. it had been a huge success, this production, at Stratford, not with me, and in London, with Dame Peggy Ashcroft playing, you know, the lead, all that. But when it got to New York, the mixture of American and English actors, it didn't really work that well. But I again got one of my favorite reviews. The writer, Gore Vidal, gave it a review in a magazine, and he said it was a little bit boring, and he was criticising it quite a lot. And then, this is awfully conceited to tell us, but he said right at the end, but there is a reason for seeing it, and that is Jean Marsh's hero, who is beautiful, 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 beautiful. And I thought, that's all you ever want. To hell with being a good actress.
It's a great review.
Well, you know, if you spend your whole life thinking that, well, knowing that your sister's prettier than you, and having heard, actually being told you're too plain to go for an audition, if somebody like Gore Vidal says that, you do tend to think, you know, that's everybody else.
You were in America about 3 or 4 years or so. You appeared on
The first time, yeah.
American TV with Larry Olivier in The Moon and Sixpence.
Yeah.
So you're working with Gilbert, now you're working with Olivier. I mean, this is incredible. This is like can it get any better than that?
Yes, it was extraordinary. Really quite amazing. I did think maybe I ought to retire after that. But I was playing a ludicrous role. I was playing his Tahitian mistress, which was supposed to be played by Pierre Angeli, who was much more right for it. She's got brown eyes and rather sort of liquid looking. And somebody saw me in a showbiz restaurant, Sardi's, and came up to me and said, was I an actress? And I said, yes. They said, well, they weren't 100% sure whether Pierre Angeli should play this role, and would I go and meet the producer? So I did, and he said, I think he fell in love with me, because he said, yes, you are going to play the part. Well, to have a green-eyed Tahitian with a turned-up nose, you know, it's just so ludicrous. It took them so long to make me up. My hair, my natural hair, was sort of reddish. They had to put carbon paper to take the red out of my long, I had very long hair. And they sort of straightened my nose with putty, and there was all this sort of dye on my face. But through it all, my eyes got greener and greener and greener. So I thought it was daft, but it was wonderful fun for us to do it.
You did quite a bit of American TV. You appeared in Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, a second to that.
Well, that's a huge thing. I get as much mail for doing one episode of Twilight Zone as I, you know, like Doctor Who and Upstairs, Downstairs.
Well, in
because
America,
it was a
that
cult
is the
thing.
series. That is like the great anthology series ever made. It's one of those.
And quite rightly so. It was beautifully made. Wonderful actors. He was a wonderful writer, Rod Serling, and some of the directors of that series went on to be the great
Indeed.
American film directors.
Some of those actors as well in it.
Yeah, this is true.
It's a very much sort of talent there. You came back to England and missed the swinging 60s.
Did I? Is that when it was?
Well,
But I mean, people who lived there didn't really notice it swinging, you know.
you did a few West End plays. I think you did a film for Disney as well.
Yeah,
I'm interested in the film you made for Albert Finney called Charlie Bubbles.
Oh yes, well, you had one line.
Well, yeah, it's a small role, but Finney, this is the first time he'd actually written and acted and directed all in one go on a feature film. I think that was Liza Minnelli's first major sort of screen role, wasn't it?
I don't know, was it? I mean, funny because she was a friend of mine.
She's done a lot of shows, but hadn't done actually.
No, I think it's the other way around. She hadn't established herself then as the great singer, because I can remember when she started doing concerts, I thought, my God, how brave to do that when that's what your mother did. I mean, can you imagine having a mother like Judy Garland and then having the courage to do what Liza did? She wasn't an established actress, but I don't think she wasn't doing her concerts or anything like that yet.
But there's an interesting way you were paid on that film, isn't there? You didn't actually receive money.
Well, you see, the thing was that I'd known him, it's almost since I was a kid, really, since my mid-teens. And I used to see him at cricket matches. I think I had a boyfriend who played cricket. And I think he just saw me out one night and said, "You'd be absolutely perfect to play the waitress at the sort of Granada Help Yourself on the M4 or something." I said, "I don't think I've ever had a better compliment." And he said, "It's only one line." I said, "Oh." He said, "It's only one day's work, one night's work." He said, "And it's lots of fun." I said, "Oh, all right then, just for a lark, but you've got to send me a Rolls Royce to take me to the location. And I don't want you to send any money to my agent. I want a case of champagne." He said, "Fine." I said, "But not any champagne." I said, "It's got to be Krug or Dom Perignon." So he
You
said,
get a bottle
"Fine."
of brandy as well, didn't you?
Well, the thing was that I finished, and then he called me up and said, "The sound was so bad, you've got to come in and revoice it." I said, "It's only 2 words. It's down there," I said. Somebody said to me, where are the cakes?" I said, "It's down there." He said, "Well, you've still got to come in." I said, "Well, I want a bottle of brandy for that as well." Yeah.
I'm going to backtrack slightly now a little bit because people in this audience will be interested in this. You appeared in the Crusade story of Doctor Who
Yeah.
with Billy Hartnell. How did you come to be offered that particular role?
Well, it was absolutely straightforward. It's lovely if you can tell a story like somebody coming up to you in Sardis and saying, "Would you like to play the role of a lifetime?" which has happened. But I think they just called my agent and offered me the part, possibly because I think I'm quite well known as a Francophile and I speak a bit of French, and I was playing the Princess of France, wasn't I? I don't honestly know, but it was just offered.
Were you aware that Julian Glover was going to be in this
No,
story?
no.
So that was added bonus, of course, when you saw him, I suppose.
Well, I knew before because he was married to my best friend,
Eileen Atkins.
Eileen Atkins.
And of course, we'll go to this later,
Yeah.
because also Eileen Atkins, you co-created Upstairs Downstairs, which
Yeah.
we'll go to a bit later
Yeah.
on. Only one episode of that exists now, unfortunately, Crusade.
Oh, is that so?
The rest of it's been destroyed.
Oh gosh, I can't even fill you in because I don't remember it.
we have one surviving half-hour segment. Now, following on from that, Douglas Camfield cast you in the Dalek Master Plan as Sarah Kingdom,
Yes.
a space security agent.
Was that what I was, the space
Something like
security agent?
that.
Difficult to say space security.
It is. I think you had a few drinks. What are your memories of that? Because I seem to have read that there was a lot of laughter on the set.
Well,
and
I
at
did
one
get
point
into trouble.
you were told to go away until you stopped laughing.
Well, I think what happened was that if people take everything, even Shakespeare, whatever it is, too seriously, it does make you laugh, and I am a bit of a giggler. So there happened to be people on the set who were taking it, I think, too seriously. And then it was a sort of series of events that got me into trouble. First of all, there were the Daleks who were on the set, and it was a no-smoking set. And people used to ask the Daleks to lend them the Dalek machine. And so a Dalek would go up, get out of his machine, and then the person would get into the machine and have a and then you'd see Daleks smoking. So that made me laugh a bit. And then at one point, it was terribly serious. On Action Gene, you switch on the whatever it's called, the TARDIS, and it takes off. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Action Gene, okay, and the knob came off. It was a terrible set. It was very tacky. It was stuck together by glue. It was just shot very well. So, getting to laugh a bit more. And then I'd always thought that my costume was a bit funny. I don't know why you go into the future and into space, and all the girls have to wear tight-fitting, one-piece kind of romper suits with belts round it, to show off your body. I mean, surely that's not very practical. And mine was a bit elasticy, so I used to like them having it bounce back. And attached to my belt was something that looked to me like a gas mask case, and in it was supposed to be my ray gun and all sorts of bits and pieces that did things to the TARDIS. But what was really inside there, I used to keep my dressing room keys, a handkerchief, and on this day when I got into trouble, a tomato sandwich.
This is on
On the set, so it's all there, ready.
While you were filming, yours was in your...
All this was there, because there was no reason to have anything in there, because I didn't have a death ray gun or anything like that. I would have rattled, you see. So my instructions were that on the command, whatever it was, you take out your ray gun. And I said, I haven't got a ray gun. They said, well, props will give you one. I said, well, when will props give you one? When we say the action. So they said action, and I put my hand out, and they said, no, that looks very funny. Go to get into your bag, and props will give you one from behind. So the props wasn't there, so I had to put my hand right in my bag, and my fingers squashed on my tomato sandwich. And I came out, and I took the ray gun, and there was tomato all over my hand. So then that finished when I laughed, and I laughed. And then they kept shouting from the tops, be quiet. Will tell that woman to be quiet. I was too old to shout at. You can't tell grown-ups to shut up. I was 27, 28 or something at the time. And so I laughed more and more and more. And then what finished me off was, they said, leave the set and don't come back until you've controlled yourself. Well, of course they can't film without me. It's an idle thing. So I laughed even more, and I said, that may be a long time. And I left the set.
You had a very famous death scene in that film where you're aged to death. I think that was filmed at Ealing Studios, but wasn't another actress employed to film?
To do me old?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. I think it was a jolly good idea. I think what happened was I was me in my stretch brown tweed romper suit, and an aging dart. It's impossible to talk about things like this seriously. An aging dart. We've got a sale of aging darts after. Hit my back, and then I instantly aged a bit, say about 5 years. And so makeup had a go at me, and then I would crouch a bit, and then I aged a little bit more. Makeup had another go at me, and then I think I got, I would say, to about 65. And then it was so sweet. They had a lovely old lady who had to be youthed a bit to sort of to 70. And then she was 80 and 90, and then she died. It was very sweet. She was lovely.
You appeared in many other TV series, like The Saint, for example. But you made a series towards the end of the 60s called The Informer, with Ian Hendry.
Yeah.
It ran for, I think, 2 seasons.
And Heather Sears. Yeah.
Indeed, and you
Yeah.
played the Informer's high-class mole.
Yes, but I wasn't allowed to sleep with him because it was before 9 o'clock. And Milton Schulman wrote in the Evening Standard, this is one of the best series we've ever done, but it falls on one important hurdle. Anybody who doesn't sleep with Jean Marsh must be crazy, even if it's before 9 o'clock.
What was Ian Hendry like to work with? Because he's an actor that I've always had admired over the years.
Well, he was, I'm afraid, a rather sad character in a way, because he was such a good actor. He was an extremely good, straightforward, very good actor, and very useful because he wasn't too good looking, all that. And then he had something very interesting about him that made him good for films and television. But he had one tragic flaw. He was a very heavy drinker. And if he hadn't been that, we would have gone on and done more of the series, but it really diminished him, and I think probably that's what he died of.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of Ian Hendry, I think of the Lotus Eaters, and that he was playing an alcoholic actually in the Lotus Eaters. That
Yes.
It must have been a struggle for him to have to do that, I would have thought.
So I suppose so. I don't know. I couldn't possibly drink and work. I drink, but I couldn't drink and work. I couldn't drink and do this. I want all my wits about me, and then drinking is for after. And any work, I don't know how somebody can be a secretary and drink.
Now, some of those episodes were directed by Michael Lindsay Hogg, who I think you were
Yes.
massively involved with at one stage. He went on to do Private Revisited with Charles Sturridge. So
Ridley Scott directed
as well,
one too,
really?
and Peter
Collinson.
Collinson.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes, I don't know if you agree, but television series more than films, the focus, sometimes it's the writing, if it's Alan Bennett or Dennis Potter, the writing, sometimes it's the actors are the most important thing. And with The Informer, however good the three of us were, it was the directors. The directors were very original, without being showy-offy, you know, not stupid, silly shots. Very original, fast-cutting, I think the series belonged to the directors. It was very interesting to work on.
I'd like to go now to Upstairs, Downstairs. Now, Irene Atkins, who actually married at the time to Julian Glover, who was actually in the episode of The Crusade we were talking about, and you, with her, you created Upstairs, Downstairs. Now, originally, wasn't that called Below Stairs? In its original drafts?
I think we called it Behind the Green Baize Door, first of all, and then we called it Below Stairs, but there was a book had just been published called Below Stairs. Even though it's a current phrase, we decided not to use that.
Would it be fair, criticise me if I'm wrong, about to call it like a flip side up to like the Forsyte Saga, for example, or something you were aiming for?
No, I didn't like the Forsyte. I love the books, the Forsyte Saga. I didn't like the series particularly. It might, in fact, have moved us to write Upstairs, Downstairs, to turn away from the heavy makeup, false look. You see, our aim with Upstairs, Downstairs was to show that you're a person, even if you don't say prithee and wear beautiful clothes. I like if I see something, to know how did they get their food, who ironed their clothes, who washed up, who answered the door. And today I like to know, I like to know the detail behind. So no, we weren't influenced by the Forsyte Saga unless it was in a way, in a negative way, to show. We simply wanted to show what went on below stairs, serving the rich upstairs, so that you would see the beautiful people and then go downstairs into the steamy kitchen and see what it was like to slave, and to see people sitting in front of a fire and know that I had been up at 5 o'clock blacking the grates. We devised it thinking about our backgrounds, and also mainly the servants didn't do anything in drama. The servants served at the table, said the carriage awaits, dinner is served.
It was the first drama to show what happens to
to give. We didn't have equal time. I think there was 2/3 of the time was upstairs and 1/3 downstairs, but we had equal value. We were people.
It's the downstairs part actors that people remember from that series.
It's funny, isn't it?
Because although the thrust, as you say, was on the upper class people remember Hudson, remember you, remember the cook. It's those characters that they remember.
We have, as a whole, we have turned out to be the most popular characters. It's interesting.
Now, the gentleman that produced The Informer developed your ideas for Upstairs, Downstairs and sold them to London Weekly Television. Is that right? I should think of his name.
Yes, John Whitney.
That's right.
John Whitney. What happened was Eileen and I had the idea, and we'd made lots of notes but hadn't written anything down. And my life was very miserable at the time. I didn't have any money, I wasn't working. And I decided to try and sell our idea. And the only producer I really knew, because that was the last thing I'd done, was John Whitley, and I knew he had Whitney.
That's it,
I knew he had a production company. So I called him and said, I've got an idea for a television series. And he said, tell me. And I said, no, I won't, I don't trust you. He said, tell me. We're having a meeting right now about a television series. So I said, oh, all right. And I told him, and he said, don't expect to hear back for weeks, because we've always got lots of ideas going. And he called back half an hour later and said, can you have lunch with us? This is urgent. Yours is the only idea we like. And I remember I had, I don't really eat lunch, but I had smoked salmon and champagne.
Sounds very good.
Yeah.
The performances in that series were striking.
The casting was good.
Yes.
The casting was almost better than the actors in a way.
Were you involved in that very heavily?
I'd had ideas, but no, I would say the credit goes to many different people. I cast myself. They wanted me, initially they thought I wanted to play Lady Marjorie, but I didn't. I wanted to play Rose. So I cast myself, but outside of that, there are the casting director, individual directors, the producer. The credit goes across the board. They all had very good ideas.
I'm just thinking, like Gordon Jackson, that he's remembered for that more than anything else these days now, isn't he? And you think about John Alderton and Pauline Collins, Gareth Hunt, they really got their launch, if you want to call it that,
Yes.
as actors. So they're
And I
acting
think it
forwards.
is. I think it's because people were well placed. Maybe except for me, I wasn't the obvious choice for Rose. I'd never played a maid before. I mean, I wasn't the obvious choice for me. But I think everybody else was just right for the part. Elizabeth, Nicola Paget was a wonderful Elizabeth. They could have chosen all sorts of beautiful girls who were sweet. And Nicola Paget's a very, very strong actress, very brave and very tough. And it made a lot of the part Elizabeth.
This series has held up over the years. They repeated some episodes, I think, 2 or 3 years ago on ITV. And it holds up. I mean, in a way, it's the template, quality drama series, measured against Upstairs, Downstairs. But when a new one comes on, like The Grand was shown.
Well, it's so I was
The
often
critics
part
were saying
of that, yeah.
this is this is the
Yeah.
modern day Upstairs,
Yeah.
Downstairs. They keep using it. So
Yeah, and
obviously-
it's funny. It looks like it too. It's a funny thing. It was good, and it's difficult to say why it was good because everybody, when you've got an idea, you write a play, you write a television series, you produce something. Everybody goes into the studio with the idea of making something good. They don't go in thinking, well, let's get this out quickly and make a few bob and go home. Everybody, whatever it is, wants to make it good. And we succeeded. And there was one of those wonderful pieces of luck hovering over it. Every department, not just the things you see or the writing, the crew were good. The crew,
costume design.
the costume
It's
design.
superb.
And the budget was tiny. Absolutely mind
Well, it
blowing.
has a look of a mini feature film in terms of TV. I mean, even now it can hold its own because it looks gorgeous.
The sounds very good for tape. So all those things, there's no point in us being good if the cameramen aren't getting good shots and you can't hear us. The whole backup system, everybody was good. It all came together.
Moving on a little bit, you made a film for Alfred Hitchcock called Frenzy,
Yeah.
which I'm very interested about. I love Hitchcock's films. Well, he's got this attitude, or this reputation, his attitude with actors was that they were like cattle. They were just superfluous to the story almost. Did you
Yeah.
find that with him?
Well, I did. I suppose in a way. I when I said I would do the part, I did it partly because I wanted to meet him, and I wanted to sort of have a go at him. I wanted to be rude to him because I thought, what a bloody cheat. So my first or second or third day on the set, he invited me into his caravan every day to sit and talk to him. He always seemed to pick on one person that he liked to have a chat to. And as I wasn't about to be a film star, I didn't need to impress him. I had my career. I could be quite strong, and we would argue about all sorts of things. And one day I said to him, do you really think that actors are stupid and that we're just cattle to be led around? He said, yes. Oh, yeah. And I said, well, more fool you for spending your life working with people you despise, because I certainly wouldn't. He did laugh.
Was he a director that required a lot of takes, or did you prepare and rehearse beforehand?
No, he didn't rehearse at all. You rehearsed with the assistant director, maybe, but he drew it all, so he knew exactly what he wanted.
Storyboarded it
Yes, down to the last detail, and he knew exactly what he wanted, the shade of voice, and only once did he listen to me or to us. He said, I want you to tone this down. I remember he said something to me about that. And I said, I will, of course I will, but I wish you'd do it twice. Once as you wanted and once as mine. I said, because women are much more dramatic than men, and something dramatic has happened to this woman. And she's a slightly sort of a drama queen, I think. And he said, all right. So he did do it twice, and he chose my shot. But averagely, he was absolutely prepared, and you had to fit in. The actor I was playing opposite in my scenes, John Finch, rewrote some of his lines without asking him permission. He didn't even tell me that, the actor. And I said to the actor, can we run through the lines? Because it's a bit nerve-wracking when you're not really rehearsing. you're not sure you know them until you say them. So we ran through our lines, and I said, wait a minute, I don't think I've learned my lines well. I don't remember you saying that. He said, well, I've rewritten it a bit. And then Hitchcock said, well, we're going to do it now. And without telling Hitchcock, he changed these lines. And Hitchcock said, can't. And he said, you know, what is this? And John Finch said, well, I thought that this was that and that. He didn't say a word to him. He called the assistant director, terrifying. He said, can you get me Mr. Schaffer on the telephone, please? Mobile telephone. Got Peter Schaffer, said, could you come to the set, please? Mr. Finch doesn't like your words. And I thought, where is Peter? And he was like 2 hours drive away. And he didn't say anything, he just sat there.
And waited.
And waited. John Finch eventually got up and said, I'll do it.
Amazing.
Well, actually, Hitchcock was right.
Hitchcock's films have a reputation, they're like a fine wine almost, because when they first came out, they got bad reviews mostly. Even Psycho, which is now regarded as perhaps his best movie, the reviews were dreadful. Same thing with
Frenzy. Well, Frenzy isn't a good film.
But now it's reviewed as such. You'd be surprised.
I think it's because it's become a bit cultish, but it was very anachronistic. There were the crowd scenes were highly unlikely. They were as if they were shot before the war. I found it a good thriller, but very dated, very old-fashioned, and I think that's how people perceived it. But his work is always work.
Yes, I mean, but his films do improve over a period of time.
It's just he was an artist in his area. I mean, he's not my favourite director, but I can stand back and observe and think he was wonderful. And so the work stands up whether they're faulty or not.
Wasn't there an interesting, all the actresses got flowers after the film was finished.
Yeah.
You didn't get any flowers.
No, I didn't. I was rather upset. Well,
something else instead.
we'd had a couple of rows. I mean, not just about that. We'd had a couple of rows about politics as well. He thought I was a Guardian reading, sandal-wearing, left-wing twit. And I suppose I'm all those things, but not a twit. And then we'd had dreadful rows about food. Because he said, well, this is so typical of him, that he had a walk-in deep freeze. You'd think, well, he'd probably murder somebody. And that when he got home at night, he would walk into his deep freeze, hungry, and take out something that said Coq au vin 1972, and heat it up. He said, and that was wonderful food. And I said, I don't eat. I don't eat frozen food at all. He said, well, how big is your deep freeze? And I said, I haven't got a deep freeze. I said, I've got an ice-making compartment in my tiny refrigerator. He said, well, what do you eat when you go home? I said, you know, whatever I can cook quickly. If it isn't, you know, if I haven't had enough time to shop, I might have a salad or eggs and bacon. I'm not a vegetarian. He went on and on and on that I must have a deep freeze, and then I was ludicrous. So that it ended, and he didn't even say goodbye. And the other girls had all had flowers in their dressing rooms, and I didn't have any flowers. And I thought, well, screw you, I don't care. And about 2 days later, I got back to my basement flat. It's quite funny. There was something huge sitting outside. It made me from sort of there to there and up to there. And I thought, what is it? I thought, the bastard! He sent me a deep freeze as a joke. And this is bigger than my flat. So I started to pull it aside out there. We'd also talked about wine. And there's a lot of very beautiful wine for me. So I thought that was a great compliment.
Very nice.
But I'm sure he'd chosen a lot of wine to torment me, so that I would think it was a deep freeze. Because I think otherwise he just would have sent me a case, because it was rather a big present.
You also made a film in the mid-70s called The Eagle Has Landed, based on the Jack Higgins novel that John Sturges directed, which is a film I like very much indeed. Filmed at Maple Durham in Berkshire. What was that like to work on?
Well, what I remember most about it was the summer when we had a heat wave, very unusual in England, and it was over 100 degrees. And I was in a tweed suit, and everybody was hot. It was a nightmare. And onto Maple Durham, the bits and pieces of Maple Durham that exist, they had added other bits and pieces to make it a bigger village. And it was right on the bank of the Thames. And although there was something that looked like a pub, they had added on to the pub, and there was a door, and it was called the Goat and whatever it was. And I was incredibly thirsty, and I don't see well without my glasses, and I wasn't wearing my glasses. And I thought, well, I'll go into the pub and get a lemonade or something. And I opened the door and fell into the Thames. There was no pub. So I liked John Sturgis enormously. He was very attractive and just a very nice, sort of definite director.
I'm interested to hear you say that because going back to an earlier film of his, '57, Stephen Queen, at the time of Queen was offered that role. He was quite big in the TV series What Did It Rely? I think he had about 10 lines of dialogue in '57. And he was very reluctant to do the role, but the Queen said to him and his wife, I'll give you the camera. And he did, because if you think, look at that movie, Yul Brynner is the star of the picture, which really is in Queen, because he has all, the camera is always towards him.
Yes, yes.
Could you
yes,
trust him
yes.
like that then? If he gave you the camera, I mean, you had a small role in that, but it's a memorable role, because you're playing a Nazi spy.
Oh, well, he couldn't give me the camera in something like that, because you'd get into trouble with the leading
No, but
people.
I mean,
I didn't care if I was, you know, I thought it was a good, neat, small part, and you can score extremely well playing a cameo. I don't know what I thought about it really. I wasn't particularly interested in the film. It's not particularly my cup of tea, that kind of film, and I don't think I made any mark of it at all. I don't think I was bad, but I don't think I was particularly good. I think I was just there and okay. Maybe you needed, I think you might have needed something a bit heavier than me, that South African
you're quite
spy.
sinister though, because you're this English person that's turned out to be a Nazi spy, and
South African spy.
or a South African spy, but you're quite sinister and quite menacing.
Well, it's a surprise, I think, when somebody who looks like me turns out to be nasty. Like I often play witches, and I asked a director once, I said, this is the this is the 7th witch I've played in a row, and I'd like to know why. I think I look adorable. he said, you've got a lot of power for someone with a small frame, and it's a surprise when it happens. You look at you and you think, well, that's just a nice looking lady, and then suddenly you've got a punch. So maybe it was that, I don't know. But I wasn't thrilled with my work in it.
You appeared in the Disney film Return to Oz, which is another film I like very much indeed.
Oh, good, I'm glad.
Everyone thinks of The Wizard of Oz, and it's a great MGM movie, but it's not really faithful to the novels. If you read the novels. Return to Oz
It was very faithful.
very faithful indeed, sort of
Yeah.
sequel to The Wizard of Oz, but not really.
Yeah.
But the actual depiction of that is exactly as the novels were. Did that attract you to it, or?
Well, the thing is, listen, let's face it, money's attractive. To be in a major American movie and play the leading character role is very attractive. And then I've got some scruples about what I do. I won't do violence if violence isn't seen to hurt. You know, so there's some things I can't do. So I thought it was an extremely good part, and I thought it was a very black film, and therefore wouldn't compete with the rosy original. And I was very intrigued to work with the director Walter Marsh, who sadly, it wasn't a success, and I don't think he's directed since, but I don't know if any of you are real film buffs. If you are, you would know who Walter Marsh is. He is maybe the greatest sound editor, possibly the greatest editor of films there's ever been. If you watch the Oscars, and people win editing things and sound editing things, in nearly every speech they say, and I have to thank Walter Marsh, without him. He's brilliant. So he was given this film to do. It had been what he wanted to do all his life. But I don't think you can do a huge film as your first film, even though you're very, very experienced in other departments. And it wasn't.
I think the
great
public were
success.
expecting it to be like The Wizard of Oz,
Yes.
in that sugary, rose-tinted way, which, okay.
Oh, well, it was lovely,
Yeah.
The Wizard of Oz, but this was not a sequel to it. It was a dark, very truthful
Just like
film.
the books, they're quite dark
Very
as well.
dark, yeah.
You also appeared in a TV series called 9 to 5. And this was based on the Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, Dolly Parton movie.
Yeah, yeah.
I think Jane Fonda actually produced that.
Yes, she did. Mm-hmm.
So, which role did you have in that?
I didn't play one of the three girls. I played the office bitch. See, usual. Actually, there was a funny thing about how I got the part. The whole series was set up with Rita Moreno, Valerie Curtin, and Dolly Parton's sister, and it was all set to go. And they tested hundreds of women to play the office bitch, and nobody had been right. And they flew me to Los Angeles to do a test for it, along with, so this was their last kind of lump, that they were almost going to cut the part out of the series. And first of all, I read for Jane Fonda in a room, and a couple of other people. And she said to me, whatever you do, don't let them hear your English accent, because to them, the English accent means good, but no box office. So you must do it in your American accent. So I read it through for her with my American accent. She laughed a lot, and she said, right, so we're going to take you over to the studio now, and there were like another 4 or 5 marvellous actresses. And I thought, I don't know, I think this would sound very funny in an English accent. So when it was my turn, I went in, surrounded by people, so nerve-wracking. And, you're trying to please let everybody see you. And I read it, first of all, and I got some laughs, but I thought, I'm warmed up now, I wish I could do it again. And I said, when I'd gone in, I'd said, hey, hi, hey, hello there, my name's Jean Marsh and all that. And I said, listen, you probably know I'm English. If I'm fast, can I do it in my English accent? And the people who knew that the powers that be hated, the English went, like that. So I did it in my English accent, exaggerating it. And they said, thank you very much. And as I walked out of the door, I heard the big boss man say, Jean Marsh with her English accent. So that's how I got the part.
That's excellent. Very interesting. Coming back to Doctor Who again, you came back to that series in 1989, which I think was the last year the series was actually built before it cancelled. Sylvester McCoy.
Is it that long ago?
It is, 89.
God.
Sylvester McCoy was playing the Doctor then. It's interesting, you worked with William Hartnell a couple of times, and now you're working with Sylvester McCoy. How had the series changed? I mean, it's probably a bland question to ask maybe, but it was black and white videotape, and now you're talking about...
It was noticeably better in a way. The sets were a bit better, and it was taken much more seriously. I still laughed, of course, but they were really good actors, and you were given more rehearsal time. I suppose by then it had become such a success that they spent a bit more time and money on it. It just had a little bit more weight behind it. And I wouldn't have done it by then. I didn't need to do bits and pieces. I wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been a good script. I had 4 scripts. They were the first 4 of the series, and there was no way I would have done anything like Doctor Who, because I didn't need to do it if I hadn't really liked the part and hadn't really liked the scripts.
I mean, it's sort of an Arthur type feel to it. I mean, your character isn't a million miles from Morgana, really, is it?
Well, it is.
It is,
mean,
yeah. And you acted with Nicholas Courtney in that, who actually was in Dark Master of
I hadn't remembered.
playing your brother.
Yeah.
He played your brother in the Dark Master of
Yes, you have to tell me these things. I mean, when I saw him on the set, he said, we meet again. And I thought, oh, do we? But it's partly because I can't see,
But you enjoyed making Battlefield then?
I loved it. I liked it better than the other 2.
It's a strong part, wasn't it?
It was a wonderful part. And who was the director? charming.
Does anyone know the director of Battlefield?
Well, he was a really good director, and he was very, very wise, because he let us laugh. He gave us permission to laugh. He let that sort of bad behaviour breathe, but he was very good at getting us to shut up and get on with it. He didn't waste any time. He had great authority and was lovely and friendly as well. And all the actors were good, and I mean, I was allowed to make a real character of it. I didn't have just to be, you know, this sort of snooty witch thing. I was allowed to present the side of Morgan Le Fay, who was a real human being as well, and I think that's much more exciting. And I remember the only one fight I did have about it, and again, laughter. I've got some very funny little snaps of us all laughing, tears rolling down our cheeks at rehearsals. But I had a sort of magic ball or crystal thing that was supposed to float in the air. And you're supposed to, and I was supposed to see what was going to happen, what was happening at the same time. And of course, in rehearsals, you don't expect a magic ball to float in the air. So I said, can I have something, please, to use? And they gave me a glass lampshade, like that with a flange at the bottom, like from an imitation Victorian thing. So I would hold that, and I would say, can I have Borley, please? Because it was described as a ball, and they would say, here's your Borley. And everyone kept saying, how are you going to do the ball? And he said, oh, you know, it'll all be done. And Jean will know, it'll be superimposed, or it'll be floating in front, or it'll be on a wire. And I thought, well, that's good. I said, when am I going to have Borley? Because it would be nice to actually have real Borley. He said, don't worry about it. So over and over again. Then we got onto the set, the day of the actual shooting in the morning, run through them, and I said, am I going to have real Borley now? They said, no, Borley isn't ready yet. So I was still on the same lampshade, still on the same lampshade. Well, we actually did it. I said, right, before we start, can I see Borley? And they said, it doesn't work, you're going to have to use the lampshade. I said, this is very hard. I was very difficult. No, I almost closed my eyes while I was working with it. And you could look out of the corner of your eye and you can see someone twinkling at you, knowing that you're holding a lampshade and not the Borley. And I really had a feeling that I was never going to get Borley either. They were just keeping me quiet.
You've made a lot of TV over the years. You've worked on Murder, She Wrote with Angela Lansbury, with Rory Bremner. You've worked with
Oh, yes.
You enjoyed doing that?
Did you see the first Rory Bremner
Yes.
I did?
Yes, I did.
God, it was one of the most fantastic things I've ever done in my life for reaction in the street and reaction from my mother. Anybody here, did you see the first Rory Bremner? Am I allowed to swear?
Yes, you can.
I lived in when I got the part, I was living in a little old cottage in a hamlet, not even in a village. And down the road from me lived a little old lady, a wonderful old lady called Mavandry Piper, who was a librettist and married to a painter. But she was a little old lady. She had a fax, and I didn't. And one day, you know, Rory Bremner shows are cast the day before. It's very much last minute. One day I had a call from the Rory Bremner show to say, could you do a sketch for us tomorrow? I said, oh, I love the show. Of course I can. They said, well, we'll have to fax you the sketch. I said, don't bother. I'll do it anyway. They said, well, we think you ought to see it. I said, well, I haven't got a fax, but you can fax it to a little old lady down the road. They said, oh, we don't think we can do that. And I said, why is it rude? They said, it is a bit. I said, oh, well, she's the painter's wife. She's all right. I said, just put at the end, thank you, Mrs. Piper. So I called up Mrs. Piper and I said, they're faxing me something. I've got to look at it tonight. I said, they didn't want me to send it to you. She said, well, why do you need it? I said, well, I suppose I've got to approve it. I suppose I can learn it as well. So call me when it comes. So she called me when it came. I walked down the lane and she stood at the door with the fax and she'd come in. She said, I don't think you'll have much trouble learning it. And I can see why they were worried. Well, that year the Booker Prize had been won by a Scotsman. Every single letter, every single word was a four-letter word. I mean, it was an amazing book. And my sketch, it said, Jean sits down, looking like herself, rather prim, and opens a book, and then says, oh, fuck. Oh, Oh, fuck that. Oh, fuck that. What the fuck? Fuck me. What the fuck? Oh, fuck. And then I went on there and I went, fuck it. And I put it on the floor and I said, you have been listening to a reading from the Book of Christ. How late it was, how late. Well, of course, the crew don't know about this. It made me laugh so much. I said, so first, I've never done anything like that. So you have one run through or no run through. So they said, do you want to run through, Jean? I said, no, come after all, it's sort of written down there. So the crew didn't know what's the thing, so they were there filming and there's an audience there. And I said, oh, fuck it. And the audience said, they thought I'd made a mistake. Fuck that, and then they had to cut it because the cameras were shaking. Because they hadn't been forewarned, and all these cameramen knew me from here, sort of like, and the next day I said to Mummy, did you watch it? And she said, yes, I did. What did you think? She said, I didn't think it was you. I said, well, it was me. And people in Henley walked past me going, oh, she must need the money.
You've written a few books over the years, haven't you? A few novels.
Only 3. I'm on.
Only.
Yeah.
But obviously writing something that you like, and there's upstairs, downstairs, you've written these novels, House of Eliot also. I mean, so this is obviously something that you have a passion for.
No, I can't say I enjoy it.
But you do it.
I do it. I don't know many writers who enjoy it. It's like I shouldn't really have come here today. I should really be at home finishing my novel. Somebody said to me, have you got a deadline? And I said, yes. And they said, what is it? I said, last February. There's something very peculiar about writing. You don't want to do it. You don't want to sit down. You hate it when you're doing it. And sometimes it takes you over and you're pleased. When you put, I write in longhand, when you put your pen down, you're thrilled. So the actual process isn't really very rewarding. And yet, you want to do it. It's much easier and much more fun to act. Much to connect with other people and to have the responsibility of working with other people. But to work at home alone is terribly hard.
In a moment, we'll open this up to the audience to ask questions. I'd just like to ask you about the fatherland in which you appeared with Miranda Richardson.
Yes.
Now, I think you said to me earlier that the reason that one of the reasons you accepted that role was to work with Miranda.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
Well, again, that was a sort of everything, nearly everything about it was a lovely experience. I'm still silly enough to be thrilled if I'm offered anything. And to like some of the glamour of it. I'd been working in New York and I was sitting up in bed in New York and the phone went. Hello, it was my English agent. And she said, I've had an offer for you, which went like a wonderful offer, no audition, no test. She said, to play a very small but very good part in Fatherland. And I said, oh, how small? She said, it's only 1 day's work. I said, oh. She said, but it's that one scene with Miranda Richardson. I said, oh, I'll do it. She said, no, you must read the script. I said, look, Miranda Richardson wouldn't do a bad film. And to have the opportunity of having the whole scene with her would be wonderful. She said, well, no, you must read the script. I said, well, all right. And I said, where's it being filmed this one day? She said, Prague.
The city of Prague as well.
Yeah, and I'd never been to Prague. I said, so one day, Prague, Miranda Richardson. How exciting.
They get paid as well.
Yeah, and what the funny thing was, they were just coming to, you don't get residuals and things anymore. They do a buyout, which is horrid. You've got nothing to look forward to. She said it's a buyout, but it was a lot of money for 1 day's work, in anybody's terms. So I said, wow, all that. Then I put the receiver down and she said, they're biking it over to you, to your hotel from somewhere. And then the phone went again and it was the producers in Los Angeles saying, we beg you to do it. You thought, oh, God. Fantastic. And then I got the script and it was wonderful. It was a wonderful part. A really evil, awful Nazi actress who thought that she was a cross between Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich, and horrible, vile things I had to say. So of course I said yes straight away. And nearly everything to do with the film was just wonderful. I went to Prague. I loved Prague. I loved working with Miranda Richardson. And when I first got there, I went into the makeup caravan and the makeup people said, wait, they were Hungarian, wait, they knew who I was. And I said, I won't wait, I'm due on the set quite soon anyway, I don't mind making myself up. So I started to make myself up. They said, you look awful. I said, well, I'm supposed to look awful. I'd overdone the makeup. And I said, well, what about my hair? They said, wait. I said, my hair then. So I plastered it down and I made a huge sausage like they did in 40s days and sprayed it. They said, you look awful. I said, I'm supposed to. Anyway, I went on the set. At lunchtime, Rutger Hauer came up to me. He wasn't on the scene. Flung himself at my feet. Literally flung himself, very dramatic, and said, you're wonderful, you're wonderful. Nobody else would be so brave and bold. I said, thank you. Then the makeup girls knelt at my feet and said, we are sorry. We thought you were an extra. You shouldn't behave like that to an extra anyway. So that was lovely. I finished the day. The producers took me out to dinner, gave me a fabulous dinner, and they said, it's the best performance we've had in the film so far. I thought, oh, it was one day's work. And it was all over fine. I went back to London. And it opened in America as a film. And it got very bad reviews. Except. But there is a reason for seeing it. They said, wait and watch the little boy. And Jean Marsh is this repellent Nazi actress. So that was nice as well. So that was thrilling. And then you think, well, that's all over. You know, that was wonderful. Then I got a call to say I'd been nominated as Best Supporting Actress in a film on television. And would I like to go to Los Angeles first class? I had 2 first-class round trips, 2 suites, a long stretch limo, and I thought, this is fantastic.
For one day's work.
Yeah, and of course I knew I wouldn't win. I was up against Diana Rigg playing a big part, all sorts of people, and I won. So they announced the winner is Jean Marsh. I can't believe it. And then you think, well, that's all over, and I forget all about it. And then about, this has got a reason, it brings it up to this afternoon. A few weeks ago, it was shown on a cable network. And a director who was about to do Bleak House on radio saw it and called me up and said, would I play the old lady, Miss Flight, in Bleak House on radio? So I even got that job from it, and that starts this afternoon. So one day's work can lead to all sorts of things, and yet you can do 3 months playing the lead and think, aren't I lucky, and nothing happens to it at all. Yeah. I think we're up to date.
We'll open this up now to people from the audience. Would anyone like to ask Jean Marsh a question just about Doctor Who maybe, about her career? Any questions for her at all?
Yes.
Going back to upstairs, downstairs,
Yeah.
when you spoke wrote to it for so long, did you sort of try and go sort of ask older generation what it was actually like back in the sort of late performance in audience?
Well, what I did was, Eileen and I only devised it and wrote the story and some outlines. We didn't write each script. There were 12 different writers, you know, because that's 68 episodes, that's a lot. But both with that and with The House of Eliot, I wrote the novel, The House of Eliot, what I did was, I would ask anybody I knew who was old, who had a reasonable memory, what they remembered their mothers telling them and what they remembered themselves, to get little details. But also there were books written at the time. If you're ever writing something set in the past, if you read books that were actually written at the time, you'll find all sorts of little details that wouldn't be in things that you, like if I was writing about something, I wouldn't know it as much. And then I also am very lucky. My mother is 91, has all her marbles, and she was brought up by her great-grandmother, and my mother has an incredible memory. So I ask my mother questions, and she's giving me information from somebody who was born in 1820.
Amazing.
So it's a very curious connection I have. Very few people have got that. Very few people have got a mother of that age who's got a better memory than you. And that to remember what her great-grandmother said is extraordinary. But it's huge fun. I mean, I think you don't do it when you're young, but as you get older, it's wonderful to ask your parents and aunties and grandparents questions. It's just interesting, even if you're not going to write about it.
Any other questions, actually, Marsh?
Yeah, in the 70s when upstairs downstairs were made, there was a lot of good TV around at that time, which is still available very well today. Do you feel that current TV is lacking in art of what I would class as good drama, or do you think it's TV just as good as it was a number of years ago?
Well, I'm not totally sure. Don't forget that sometimes your opinions and your tastes are to do with age. I think straightforward drama, say like Upstairs, Downstairs, isn't as good. I think it's rather banal. I don't find it particularly interesting. I think the adaptations of Dickens and all those sort of things aren't particularly good. But I think comedy can be wonderful today. I think something like The Fast Show and Rory Bremner, what a wonderful. They might not, Harry Enfield, they might not be wonderful all the time, but I think The Fast Show is just as good as any comedy show that's ever been on. So there's always a time when, say, like, there are years when documentaries are better, there are years when drama's better. At the moment, we make our drama mainly to sell abroad, so we don't make it for English people, and I think that's when it gets a little bit boring, not particularly interesting. If they made it for us, I think people would still want to buy it, but we don't make it in the same way. But having said that, that would just be maybe age, and I don't watch very much either. I don't come from the age of people who watch television necessarily. I read more, I listen to music. I know it sounds odd, because obviously I'm not an old woman, but I didn't have a television set until I married, in fact.
True.
We didn't have a television set at home. I was 16 before we had a telephone. So it's not, you know, if you buy a car, my feeling is you don't have to drive it every day. If you've got a television set, you don't have to watch it every day. Whereas today, people do seem to watch it every day, and I can't understand why. Why don't you just look at it and think, well, I want to watch that at 9 o'clock. Watch it and do something else before and after.
Tend to have its background, don't you, to other things that are going on sometimes. I think people
Not me. But I think one of the problems is the fact that it's light in the picture. And you put it on, and then when you switch it off, it's as if you've thrown water on a fire. I think that's one of the problems.
Interesting. Any other questions?
Is there any role you wish you had of go?
There's some things in the theatre I wish I'd done. There's a very strange play called Lulu by Wedekind that was made into a film with Louise Brooke hundreds of years ago. I'd love to have played that part, very strange part.
Louise Brooks must be in the 20s.
Yeah, it was. The books were...
You've been around then, did you?
No, I wouldn't do exactly that, but it's a play as well as it was called Pandora's
see.
Box. No, I would like to have done it in the theatre. I would like to have played Beatrice. I would like to have done more classical roles, really. But then whatever I'm doing, I always want to do something else. After I'd played about 5 or 6 witches in a role, I thought I'd love to play a woman in a raincoat at a bus stop. Just a nice, ordinary woman. But there are quite a few things, I suppose. But I try not to think about it because there's nothing I can do about it because of age, you know. In olden days, as long as you retained a certain shape, you could play anything into your old age, but you can't do it now because of television. Everybody knows how old you are, so they won't believe you in the theatre. So there's no point in being sad and having regrets, especially when I have a lovely life. So
Is ageism a problem, would you say, for an actress, or for an actor for that matter? I mean, do you find that you are offered parts that, after your age, you never offered like a part perhaps that you could play because...
Oh, well, certainly, but there's no reason why I should. I mean, I couldn't possibly be expected to be cast as a 40-year-old or even a 50-year-old, because there are 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds. I may get distressed when it says, I think the last thing I did, it said she's in her middle 70s. I said to the director, I said, look, I am doing it, but I'm not going to make myself look any older. He said, oh, well, it's fine, we're playing it, you can play at your own age. And I said, well, what age do you think I look? He said, well, it's nothing to do with what you look. He said, I know how old you are. So there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, the big thing is to say to yourself, how wonderful to work. Just keep working. But you're far more likely to have little telling cameos than long ones.
As an actress, no, I'd like to ask you, I mean, obviously, work is great, and you've done writing as well. When you're younger and you're not working, is that more difficult? Now you're an experienced actress, you probably appreciate resting between different roles anyway now, and you haven't got the panic, I must get to work because, I've got to get...
That's not true, you still have the same panic. You heard of an actress called Kathleen Nesbitt? She was in Upstairs Downstairs. We had the same agent in New York, and she had been on the road touring in America in a play at the age of 89, and a week after it closed and she was in New York, she called our agent and said, Milton, I have been out of work for a week. So she was panicking. I tell you, it is a little bit different for a woman. I think it's very harder for a man, an actor, to be out of work, because they can't make their existence sort of a positive thing, whereas a woman can actually look after the house, cook, and it's part of one's whole being. I have my private life is as important to me as work, so I really love pottering, I love going for walks, that sort of thing. So my life is quite full, and then I'm always working on future projects. If you're not a writer at all, it's very hard to be out of work, because, all right, you only need one job, but it's a bit like selling a house. You've got a house to sell, and you've got a debt, and you only need one buyer, but you maybe a year, and as an actor, maybe a year before you get a job, so it is hard. The most important thing is not to sit at home and fret, and not to go to the pub. You should fill your life with good, interesting things. Go to galleries, go to see people work. Just do interesting things.
Do you go to many plays yourself?
Some, yeah. But I try to go to sort of the fringe things as well, because partly being involved, that I want to see actors to suggest, and I like very much to keep up with young actors. I don't want just to know all the people that I've worked with. I like to see the new people coming along.
That's good to know. Any other questions for Jean Marsh? There's a few now.
Would you like your character Sarah Kingdom to survive the dark master plan and to do a few more episodes?
No, that was fine. I was never going to be. I was never going to be in it as a long-term thing. So that was how it was planned. It was written with the death written in, and I wouldn't have been one of the what they call handmaidens or something. The doctor's companions. I wouldn't have been one of those. I was too busy and wanted other things. So no, that was fine. That was how it was written, and that was why I did it. Just the same as with the 4-part I did. 4 parts. That was fine.
Any other questions?
There's a name.
May I ask you 2 questions?
Yes.
First of all, many actors and actresses are very reluctant, for many reasons, I guess, to look back on their earlier works. Do you actually spend time to look at your works? And sadly, in the case of Doctor Who, of course, many of the episodes, as we've said, no longer exist. Is that a personal disappointment to you?
No, I haven't seen them all anyway. I don't look at all my work. I've seen all of Upstairs Downstairs because I've been involved, haven't been involved with it. But I'm ashamed to say that I haven't seen even Fatherland yet.
You ought to see that.
Well, the thing is, a friend of mine forced me, almost at gunpoint, when I said to him, oh, well, I was lucky to win the award, and he said no, and he asked me to dinner with his family, and they put only my section on. I don't find it necessary to see the work. So I haven't seen all the Doctor Who's anyway. I don't mind. You know, I mind that some of the work has gone because I think it's dreadful to let work go. I think, you know, The Informer doesn't exist, it's been wiped.
It's a shame, isn't it?
Most of Ready, Steady, Go, some of the greatest pop music video that's ever been, has been wiped.
The Reading also, Hancock's Half Hour,
Yes.
They found the other day, it had lost for years, in 1969, the Apollo moonshot, the studio footage between Patrick Moore and James Burke had been lost, apart from about 1 or 2 minutes.
Yes.
And the NASA live feeds obviously still exist. But the other day, in Gloucestershire, they found somebody who had actually made his own video set recorder.
Yes.
45 minutes of half-inch
Hope he made a lot of money.
exists of Patrick Moore and James Burke in the studio talking
Yeah.
about the mission, which the BBC are so glad to
It's,
get back. So
it's just
possible,
amazing
isn't
to me that they chuck it all away.
historically,
It's history.
yes, I agree
Yeah.
with you. But I think you think of Hancock and you think of,
Terribly important.
you know, how could they destroy his episodes? I mean, it's very sad.
Cheapskate.
Can I also ask you, talking of the Dickens radio play that's going to be on this afternoon,
Yes.
there's been a lot of criticism recently of adaptations which, for whatever reasons, haven't actually been true to the book. I read in the Radio Times that they've decided to cut out huge chunks of Dickens. I know he can be quite wordy. In your view, is it quite a true adaptation? And also, I understand that it was actually on location at Chiddingstone,
Very
which is
strange.
unusual for a radio play.
Very
presumably.
strange. Very, very
For
strange.
radio.
Well, so that's a question in 2 parts. What we have to accept is that when you see a Dickens on television or you hear it on the radio, it is not Dickens. It's Dickens' story. It isn't the literary experience. It isn't a substitute. There's no point in you watching or listening to this and thinking that it's got, that you are, that's the whole thing. It isn't it. If you want the whole thing, you either buy it recorded, you know, with an actor or an actress reading the whole thing, or you read it. So of course it's going to be changed, and things are cut out. There are literary things that you simply can't keep in an adaptation. Now, to do with this one, quite a lot has been cut out. I might have chosen different things to cut out if I'd adapted it. I don't know. I think Bleak House is the most difficult one to do because it's very, very long. So I just think you choose. I think the thing to do is, do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy watching? What's one on Vanity Fair? Do you enjoy watching Vanity Fair? That's all it's aiming at. It's not Thackeray. Listen to Bleak House. Do enjoy listening to it. It might make you read the book, or you might just enjoy the experience. It's an adaptation. Just enjoy it. Now, as the thing about shooting it on location, I found it fascinating because had I been reading, had it been it, I wouldn't have liked it. It would have been very intrusive on the master's work. But it wasn't it. You know, it is the adaptation. So we were all at Chiddingstone Castle. The girls actually wore dresses. I wore boots so that they creaked on the floor. At one time did I have any sounds made for me. I would actually enter from downstairs and run upstairs, and you would hear my feet doing that. You'd hear, I opened the door, I went in, I closed the door, I was panting. I said, I have just come from Chancery with my papers. They were my papers. I rustled the papers. If I dropped my bag, I had to pick it up. Everything was done. We even shot scenes that were in a coach and pair rather, in a coach with 2 horses, trick-trotting around on cobblestones, and we had to project our voices to go above the cobblestones. It was very exciting. I had a heavy bag that I did the clasp and the opening. I opened a window. If it was stiff, fine. To pull it. The only sound that I had put in was I play Miss Flight, who keeps birds. And when the whole thing is over, she says, when Chancery has decided who's won, she will release her birds. And the only thing that was dubbed in were the birds flapping away. So I think it gave us all a lot of energy, and we all liked doing it.
Thank you.
Interesting. Any other questions?
Yeah.
I just wondered what you preferred, like, classic theatre, sort of compared with sort of modern television film, and how you found it different, comparing for two very different.
Well, if you do something modern, it's if you do something classical, it's probably double the work in a way, because you've got to learn the lines and you've got to learn them spot on. I mean, and you really shouldn't say or anything. You should put all your feelings into the words. So if you say, now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by our son of York, you shouldn't have to act it by saying, oh, now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer. But you should do it with the acting. You should say, now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by that. You should put it all in there. You shouldn't pin your O's and R's. You shouldn't put that bit of yourself into it. If you're doing something modern, so you do that and you translate it for yourself, and then you've got to do the translation for the audience, because you've got to let the audience know what you're talking about once you know yourself. Because we don't always know straight away. It's a kind of translation. In modern stuff, there's another sort of thing of keeping it very fresh and immediate. And so there's a different feeling about the learning. You've got to be prepared to be faced with a character who might not speak exactly the way it is on the page. So it's a little bit of a surprise. It's a question of keeping it fresh. And I like both. Clearly, if you do a classic, no classic has lived unless it's wonderful. Somebody said in the whole history of the world, 2,000 years of drama, there are maybe 400 good plays. So if you do something that's written in the past, it's bound to be good. If you do something that's written today, it's not necessarily bound to be good. And then you do have to inject a lot of yourself into it to make it work. And that's where great actors who have something else come into their own, like Maggie Smith, I think. Some people say she overacts sometimes, but to me, Maggie Smith brings an extra dimension. If she's in something wonderful, good. But if she's in something that isn't wonderful, she brings a huge personality and her interesting self to it.
She could read the telephone directory. It would sound
She's
interesting.
that's why she's a star.
Yes, I
you
agree
know,
with
she's
that.
a huge star as well as being a very good actress.
Any other questions?
Eileen Atkins was in the Alan Bennett monologues recently.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you saw it and what you thought of
All of them, or
well,
just
her
her?
performance. I thought the episode she was in was brilliant.
I thought she was wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. And I didn't watch absolutely all of them. Of course, I always watch her work because she's my best friend. But my favourite was Thora Hird. I thought it was just knocked me out of my seat. Sometimes when people cry, it's overacting and it's sentimental and they want you to love them. But that's one of the best things I've ever seen on television, Thora Hird doing that. And it's not always my cup of tea, middle class, middle of the road drama, but I think they were exceptional. But I thought Eileen was wonderful. I think they were all.
Very well written, weren't they, for Alan Bennett?
Things like the Bennett thing make television worth it at the moment.
You think one face. Very good.
Any other questions? I think we're going to wrap it soon here. We're going to have a charity raffle auction. Can you tell us about the proceeds of those raffles?
Oh, right. Well, so it's my choice of charity. And I've hesitated a bit because some people are against it, but I've chosen Amnesty International because I don't have the courage of my convictions I hardly ever demonstrate, or I used to in olden days. I went on band bomb marches, but I was basically to pick up blokes. And I think today, I like Amnesty International because they are not right-wing or left-wing. They have people in the field investigating torture, you know, all the bad deeds that we know that go on all over the world. And they have found fault with this country, with America, with Ireland, with South America, with Russia, with Cuba. They are absolutely non-party, non-political, and they do a lot of dirty work for us, and things that governments can't or won't do. And they have amazingly brave people working for them, and I sometimes disagree with them, but then I think, how can you disagree with one bit when you disagreed with the other, when you agreed with another? So I just think that they're incredibly important, and when you can't always trust your government, I think you can trust Amnesty International.
All the money's raised today from the raffle tickets you sold